Hello, everyone. This is Sean from the Soccer Nostalgia blog. I have the pleasure to interview Mr. Davey Naylor. Mr. Naylor is the administrator of EnglandStats.com. He has been a frequent guest on the podcast discussing the history of the England national team. This is an interview that's separate from a podcast series. This video interview will serve as a companion piece to a written blog presentation on England national team's one cap wonders of the 1980s. Hello, Davey. Thank you for this interview, as always.
Hi, Sean. How are you?
Good, good. Thank you. Thank you.
Really good. Glad to be back.
So let's go back to the 1980s. In this decade, England were managed by Ron Greenwood and Bobby Robson. They each selected many players with the national team who had short careers. But there were a selected few within this decade that only managed a single appearance. We look back at these one cap wonders, and the aim is to look upon the reason, background, and circumstances why a certain player was selected for only one match but never again. So let's start with the year 1980. The very first one cap wonders were Alan Sunderland of Arsenal and Brighton's Peter Ward. They played their only match in a friendly on May 31st, 1980 versus Australia that England won at Sydney. In fact, Ward replaced Sunderland in the last 5 minutes. Now, this was a friendly ahead of the 1980 Euros and was used as a last chance for some players on the fringes to stake a claim on the Euro final squad. So I assume neither player was seen as anything other than a player that would make up the numbers. Do you think either had a realistic chance of further caps?
Um, Possibly. Right. Okay. So we're going to have to put this into context, right? Okay. So we're going to have to rewind slightly, first of all, back to when Greenwood was appointed. Don Revie, who was the previous England manager, left under a cloud. In fact, he left rather abruptly back in '77. He wanted to get out of his contract, and whilst pretending he was scouting in Finland, the Italians, he was actually negotiating himself a very lucrative contract in the Middle East. The FA found out and sacked him unceremoniously. They then got Greenwood in as a caretaker manager for the first couple of matches during '77, and he was fully appointed England manager in by the end of 1977. In January of '78, Greenwood appointed himself. No, you have to remember that Greenwood's tenure as England manager was very short. It was only about 5 years or so, but his legacy of what he did actually went on for probably not just in the '80s, but in the '90s. What he would do in January of 1978 was appoint a lot of backroom men to various positions. He had coaches like Bill Taylor from City and Geoff Hurst, who was managing Telford United at the time. But he also appointed B international coaches and under 21 coaches. He got Bobby Robson and Don Howe to do the B internationals. Bobby Robson, future England manager, was at Ipswich at the time. Don Howe was, I think he was just a coach at Arsenal at the time. I think he either before or later became Arsenal manager. I can't quite remember. The under 21 setup was Dave Sexton, the Man United manager, and the coach was Terry Venables, who at that time was at Crystal Palace. He would obviously later go on to become England manager as well. And they had youth coaches. They got Brian Clough to be youth coach, and his assistant Peter Taylor to do this. So this game, that was the first game that we're talking about. This one in Australia. This is actually a B international. It was designated a B international, but because it was so close to the Euro 1980s, Greenwood wanted to test out some fringe players, like you said. He didn't think that that was fair, that they were playing, that there were a couple of slots available still. I think he'd got most of his squad sorted out. There were a couple of slots available still, mostly in the midfield. But he didn't think it was fair that the players, he wanted them to give them a chance, wanted them to make them feel as if they were on equal footing. In fact, later on, he kind of like says that he didn't want the fringe players to think that they were playing in a B international. So they asked the Australian FA to upgrade this match to a full international, and the Australian FA were very happy to do that. It was originally designated as a centenary match for the Australian FA because but it was originally a B team selection. Now, Ron Greenwood was there, but it was Bobby Robson who was in charge. You've got people like Bobby Robson making his second cap. Glenn Hoddle is only making his third cap. You've got and there were a few places. Eventually, the places would go to Robson and Birtles in the end. So players like Alan Sunderland and Peter Ward, did they really have a chance of further caps? It's difficult to say. I would very much doubt it. Greenwood did this. He would select big squads ahead of championships. We'll talk about it later, but ahead of the 82 squad, he selected a squad of 32 players, which he had to whittle down to 22. He had a lot of choices, basically. So it is very interesting that these two players. Don't forget there are other people do. Yeah, so you got Alan Sunderland, that's his only cap. David Armstrong comes on for his first cap. Russell Oddman's first cap as well. Terry Butcher's first cap in that game. Terry Butcher would obviously go on to be England captain later on. But so a lot of people, were given their first starts in this game. And I guess Ward and Sunderland, they didn't feature again in any of his plans, sadly.
So 2 years later, ahead of the 1982 World Cup, on June 2nd, 1982, at Reykjavik, Tottenham's Steve Perryman and West Ham's Paul Goddard, they made their solitary appearance for England in a 1-1 tie against Iceland. Perryman entered in the last 10 minutes, replacing Alan Devonshire, and Goddard replaced Cyril Regis in the 40th minute. What do you think were the reasons for their selections?
This is similar to your first question. It happened again. So this was prior to the 1982 World Cup. Ron Greenwood has a squad of 32 players. He has two matches, one in Helsinki against Finland, which is designated a full international, and Bobby Robson's Bees were going to go to Reykjavik to play Iceland. So he divided his squad into two. He divided 16 players. The probables effectively went to Finland, basically, and the possibles went to Reykjavik to play Iceland. He'd also got a lot of injuries, and players were returning late from their clubs. Here's a quote. I found a quote. To preserve the illusion of equality between the squads, this is The Guardian quoting him. To preserve the illusion of equality between the squads, Greenwood wants tonight's match in Iceland to be regarded as a full international with senior caps awarded to those who play. So basically, he divided his squad up, but he didn't feel that it was right that these players were going to go play a B international. So he again asked the Iceland FA and the English FA, could it be upgraded to a full international? So interestingly as well, some of the other players that played during that game, you've got Glenn Hoddle again, who features. You've got Joe Corrigan as well, who probably was going to go anyway, but they took three keepers. So it was probably quite obvious that he was going to go. But the other ones were really Terry McDermott is probably the only one really who was in that lineup who really probably was going to get a seat at the table at the World Cup. The other people actually went from this team: Corrigan, Anderson, Neil Hoddle, and McDermott. They get the nod. Foster, who is on the bench and doesn't play, he goes as well to the World Cup, which is quite odd. So in a way, yes, Goddard and Perryman, who come on, they really are on the fringes of the squad. They were kind of like the first guys who possibly would have been cut. He needed to trim 10 players from his squad. And normally they if they'd have carried on the way that they planned it, they wouldn't have received a cap at all. But Greenwood felt bad that these guys had come into the squad and they were being tested, but he didn't feel that they should be doing a B international, so they upgraded it basically, and that's why they have a solitary England cap.
Perryman is often cited as an example of a player who deserved more caps, but was never got any. And in fact, in that year, 1982, he was even voted the Football Writer Association's Footballer of the Year. Maybe his heyday would have been, I would say, in the 70s, perhaps. But
Possibly, yeah,
yeah.
So he's in his 30s when he gets this cap. Obviously playing well for Spurs at the time. But Goddard is much younger West Ham player. He's early 20s, so you could probably see that Goddard might have got a few more. But yeah, Steve Perryman, it was kind of like if it hadn't happened, then it probably was never going to happen, to be honest.
So in the following year, 1983, under new manager Bobby Robson, Aston Villa goalkeeper Nigel Spink and Sunderland's Nick Pickering represented England in a tour of Australia. It was a three-match tour against a host nation, and the duo played on June 19th at Melbourne in a 1-1 tie. Spink replaced Peter Shilton in the second half, while Pickering played the entire match. What can you say about their selections?
Okay, so this is a three-match tour of Australia. This is the third match. They played 3 games in 7 days. End of season tour. There's no international competitions. The European Championships of 1984, another year away. So he picks quite. Bobby Robson, who succeeded Greenwood, has taken, and he's learnt a lot from him, and he's taken another big squad with him. Most of the players that he wants to, see on that tour played in the first 2 games, and of course he's got some fringe members of the squad that he was sentimental as well, just like Greenwood, and he didn't feel that he wanted those guys to come all that way. They wanted to get a game, so there were a number of players that he took, newbies that hadn't been capped before. There's Thomas, Williams, Byram, Gregory, Walsh, Spink, and Pickering had never in that squad, who had never been capped before, and got their first cap on that tour. None of them, by the way, got past 6 caps, and only Gregory, Williams, and Walsh got caps after that tour. So he picked quite a big squad to take with him. He had left a few of his, due to injuries and other commitments, he left a few of his bigger players behind. So he was just kind of like, it was the last game of the tour. Several players hadn't played yet, and he thought he'd give them a go. It's difficult with goalkeepers because, of course, Shilton is obviously very well established goalkeeper. This is his 53rd cap. So he chucks Nigel Spink on at half time just to give him a go. And there are other players as well that, that have their first cap. Danny. Oh no, sorry, no. So it's only Pickering and Spink in that match. But in the previous 2 matches, there's quite a few first caps guys. But these 2 never had second caps. Pickering from Sunderland and Spink is at Villa, I think. Is that right?
Yes.
I think.
Yes. So Luton forward Brian Steen was tried out in a friendly match in Paris against France on February 29th, 1984. This was a 2-0 loss. He was replaced in the 78th minute by Tony Woodcock. What can you say about this experimentation?
Yes, so 2 Platini goals. Think England here. The French are, yes, it's not pretty. Brian Steen does not have a good game. In fact, I'll quote you from The Guardian. We have been taught not to judge potential England players on the strength of one performance alone, but it's hard to see Steen embarking on an international career, is what David Lacey of The Guardian wrote. So he wasn't too impressed. And I'm guessing Neither was Bobby Robson, sadly. I don't know too much about Brian Stein. Yes, Luton Town. I guess Luton at that time were in the first division. They
Yeah.
might be again very soon. Who knows? We'll find out this weekend. But yeah, he didn't have a good game, sadly. Nobody really had a good game, but certainly
Yeah.
Stein.
In fact, Steen, he was partnered up front with Paul Walsh, his Luton teammate for that match. Yeah, and his brother Mark Stein played for Chelsea for a number of years. So Brian Stein himself, he later went to France, played for Caen, but yeah, internationally he didn't make an impact.
No, no. I think he was given a cap. It might have been due. I mean, it's difficult to ever know. But I've scoured newspaper reports, and it might be because of injuries. That's the reason why he got his call up. But certainly there were more established players ahead of him. Let's just say so. This happens throughout history of any probably international team, is that you get players getting good form, they get given a go, and then there are numerous one cap wonders throughout England's history. So it's not just particularly the 80s. We are looking at that period now, but and it's been happening before that, and it happens currently right now. There are a couple of one cap wonders being recently called up. So yes, this was not a great example of a one cap wonder, I'm afraid. Sorry, Brian.
A year later, on March 26, 1985, Nottingham Forest striker Peter Davenport was tested in a friendly versus Republic of Ireland 2-1 win for England. This match is remembered for being Gary Lineker's first goal for England. Davenport replaced Mark Hateley in the 73rd minute. What are your thoughts on his inclusion?
Well, unlike the Stein appearance, Davenport does really well in this. He actually creates the goal for Lineker. He comes on. Hateley is injured, and so Davenport comes on and he creates the goal. But I think, and this is probably why, is because doing so led to his own downfall, I guess, because Lineker then becomes established as England's number one striker. And of course, you've got Hateley and you've got other players. You've got Beardsley, who is emerging as well. So, to be honest, Davenport, by creating this goal, that consigns himself to the fate of being a one cap wonder by allowing Lineker to score his first goal and then go on to get his 48 goals. That was the start of it. So yes, sad for Davenport. He was in that Forest team that was doing so well at that time. Don't forget, this also another couple of players get their debut in this game. We've got Chris Waddle. It's his first game. Obviously, he goes on to have quite a number of caps, 62. And Gary Bailey, the old Manchester United goalkeeper, his first of two caps. He nearly was a one cap wonder, but he got a second cap, and he was in because of injuries to Shilton. And I guess Robson wanted to have a look at another option as well in goal.
Southampton's Danny Wallace managed to score in his only match for England on January 29th, 1986 at Cairo versus Egypt in a 4-0 win. Why do you think he did not gain further opportunities despite scoring on his debut?
2 words: Barnes, Waddle, basically. They weren't those two weren't established yet in the England team, but they came to prominence very soon afterwards. Barnes on the right, Waddle on the left, or was it the other way around? No, Barnes was on the right. Anyway, but no, either I think they could both play. Yes, it's very shame for Danny Wallace because he does actually get on the score sheet for this. Robson admits prior to this match, he actually says it's obvious it's not the team I would have picked had everyone been available. There were a lot of injuries. He even recalls Gordon Cowan, who hasn't played for England for 2.5 years. He admits prior to the game that this is not his preferred team. It's an odd friendly stuck in the middle of January going to Egypt. This would happen during Robson's tenure, and not necessarily his fault. Who picked these friendlies? I should think it was probably the hierarchy at the FA. We'll talk about the Saudi Arabia trip in a moment, but some of these away friendlies were hidings to nothing. There were countries that England hadn't played before, and while some trips were successful, others weren't. It was, what he would have gained out of it, I really don't know. But he had to clearly, unless if Robson picked these games, I'd be very surprised, because it doesn't seem like he would have learned much from this. He had so many injuries during this time as well. He's as I said, he's recalled Gordon Cowans. He's thrown Danny Wallace in. Peter Beardsley comes off the bench to earn his first cap during this game. He's missing quite a lot of players. Ray Wilkins is probably, he's captain's aside, but he's the most established player, playing his 75th cap. As I said, Beardsley is coming along now, and he soon replaces Wallace. Even though Wallace does really well scoring a goal, I think he's helped set up Gordon Cowan's goal. Gordon Cowans, he actually gets on the score sheet as well. So the two guys. Cowan's being in Bari at the time, playing in Italy. So it's a shame for Danny Wallace, because he does do really well, and he does warrant a second cap. But sadly, Barnes and Beardsley and Waddle come ahead of him now, so he never gets picked again, sadly.
So more than 2 years later, Sheffield Wednesday defender Mel Sterland and Arsenal's Brian Marwood played in a friendly in Riyadh versus Saudi Arabia on November 16th, 1988. It was a 1-1 tie. Sterland played the entire match, while Marwood came in the 81st minute for Chris Waddle. What are your thoughts on this duo?
Okay, well, there are five debutants in this match. You've got David Seaman, who was at QPR at the time. Also, this is when Arsenal were doing very, very, very well. So he's looking at quite a lot of players. You're looking at Michael Thomas. You're looking at Alan Smith and Brian Marwood, the three Arsenal players, and Mel Sterland playing at right back. He's from Sheffield Wednesday. David Rocar's another Arsenal player. He's only in his second cap. You've got Gary Pallister. That's his second cap. Rangers have a game, I think, either the day before, or this is Glasgow Rangers. So there's no Butcher, there's no Woods, there's no Stevens. And there's Robson, Lineker, Beardsley and Waddle are in this squad. Sterling has a steady match. Marwood comes on for the last 9 minutes, so it's very difficult to gauge an international career on 9 minutes. It, again, as I said, it's another one of these weird away friendlies that Robson probably didn't pick. And this time, unlike in Cairo when they won 4-0, this is a 1-1 draw, and the Boo Boys start coming out. In fact, I think the Sun headline the next day is "In the Name of Allah, Go," famous headline. So, yeah, there are the other three debutants in that game obviously go on to, Seaman obviously goes on to have quite a good career for England. Alan Smith, of the Arsenal Alan Smith, that is, Smudger, he has a few more caps, but don't forget Paul Gascoigne comes off the bench for only his second cap. So there's a lot of new blood in this team. You've only got Robson, as I said, Robson, Beardsley, Lineker and Waddle as the established players in this team. So he's looking at new players, but Sterland is clearly not he's an understudy for Stevens, but I guess he doesn't require him further after this game.
The decade's last lone cap was Manchester United midfielder Mike Phelan. He replaced clubmate Brian Robson at halftime in a scoreless friendly versus Italy on November 15th, 1989 at Wembley. What can be said of his call-up?
That's a good question. What could be said? Well, there's some debutants in this. 4 of the 5 subs that come on are debutants, including one David Platt, he comes on. Phelan replaces Robson. Robson is feeling a groin strain all during this game, so they kind of say to him, "Don't bother coming out for the second half. It's only a friendly." Phelan, his club mate, replaces him. Oh, by the way, other debutants that game: Mike Phelan, Dave Besant, Nigel Winterburn, and David Platt are the other three guys that come on in the second half. Yeah, he does okay during this game, but again, he's understudying really Robson, which you need understudies for Robson as he was a Captain Marvel, but he got injured quite a lot. He ended up missing quite a few major tournaments. So it was useful to see what Mike Phelan, because he was established in the Man United team at that point with Robson. It was a shame they couldn't actually play together for England, but yeah, there were other people ahead of him in this time. It was just, I guess, have a quick look for 45 minutes, and yeah, never picked again.
When we look at all these one cap wonders, what is the common thread between them, and what perhaps differentiates them in their circumstances that led to their only one appearance?
Well, some are the first two games that we talked about were B internationals being upgraded. Now you can make that what you will, but I would say that those players that played in those games kind of, I guess, I don't want to belittle their achievements, but they got lucky. I would say, having that game upgraded to a full international to become a full cap. Other guys were unlucky because they had people, established players, well ahead of them. International coaches during friendlies need to see other players, see different options. There is injuries. There's people aren't available because they have club commitments. So managers like to look at, as I said, it's happened before. It'll happen again. There are some people that they get on the pitch, they don't perform very well. They've earned that chance through their club form, but when some reason or other, when they get on a England pitch, and it's so difficult, as it's as I quoted, it's very difficult to judge someone's potential in 90 minutes or even 45 minutes that some of these players have, even less. Brian Marwood has 9 minutes. How on earth is he probably might not have even touched the ball? We don't know. I've yet to review the footage of that game. So it's sometimes it's difficult to assess whether they would have gone on or they should have gone on to have international careers. There are other players that never even got a cap. That Steve Bruce, for example, played for Man United in that defence with Pallister for many years. He never
Jimmy
got
Case.
Yeah, exactly. There you go. There are numerous. Some people that got 2 caps, 3 caps, probably didn't deserve a second. Or it just happens to be, whether it's luck, whether it's because other people, more established players, get injured or are unavailable. You get a call up, you get on the pitch, but then that's your only chance. If you're up against players like Barnes or Waddle, it's easy to see why Danny Wallace didn't get another cap when you've got those 2 established players. So in a way, he was lucky to get his cap, but then very unlucky that he does very well in his 1 cap, but then he doesn't go on any further in his England career. So it's yeah, I don't know what more we can say, really. The common thread is that all of these players got the chance in the first place, and I think that's an important thing, because you have to be to play. The FA and England managers don't hand out caps lightly. Well, they certainly shouldn't, and it should be reward for good form. And it's an honour to play for your country in any country. So they did. I'm not saying that any of them didn't deserve their call up. Some of them were luckier than others. Some of them were very unlucky, but they all, got their one call up. And it just so happened that some of them, these guys, never got another one. That might have been for many, many reasons, being overlooked, loss of form, having better players in positions, especially if you're called up later in your career. You very much wouldn't be overlooked for the next tournament, the next cycle as it comes around. So some of the players that come on at the same time go on to become very established England players. So maybe a second cap. Maybe if Danny Wallace had got a second cap, who knows? If who knows what would have happened? So we don't. So it's a shame that some of these guys only get one cap, but that's the way it goes, I suppose.
With that, I'd like to thank you for this interview, and hopefully in the future, at some point, we look at the 1990s One Cup Wonders.
Oh, I can't wait. 1990 World Cup. Yes. I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah. So, and also, please read the main blog article as well for more detail. The link is included on the video upload description, along with our respective contact information. So thank you once again, Davey. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.